try this again. I tried it before, but the audio on this thing was too low, so hopefully this will fix it. Yeah, this is a monk debate wherein Jordan Peterson and Stephen Fry debate a woman whose name I still don't remember, and Michael Eric Dyson. We're probably just going to watch the first part here where Jordan Peterson is talking about stuff.
Gentlemen, Toronto's Jordan Peterson.
Epic walk up.
Hello. So we should first decide what we're talking about.
I think in the interregnum here, maybe the other side had made their points first, and then I guess Jordan Peterson and Stephen Fry were going to do their thing. Just to point out, Stephen Fry looks like a Pentecostal preacher. You know? Just saying. I don't know what...
I'm talking about my views of political correctness, despite what you might have inferred from the last speaker's comments. This is how it looks to me. We essentially need something
It feels like political correctness as a kind of notion. I don't see a lot of utility in it. It feels like it functions to stifle conversations. There's an element where delicacy, I think, is a virtue. Taking into account at least your friend's feelings, but to assume what might offend a stranger without, like, off of, it feels like very, very insufficient information. It doesn't, just to behave in certain ways with regards to, like, entire groups of people and say that this would offend them, like, I don't know. I don't know about that.
A low-resolution grand narrative to unite us. And
by the way, he's talking very brainy here. I think some people, when they start to try and use big words, it's because they want to, flummox their opponent. I can think in his case, he actually is quite clever, and he is trying to say something, and he just, thinks other people maybe understand him, or wants other people to understand him, but with all due modesty, perhaps, I think I can catch the edges of what he's saying sometimes. I look at the basic idea, but it's, again, sometimes he talks in a very brainy
we need a narrative to unite us, because otherwise we don't have peace. What's playing out in the universities and in broader society right now is a debate between two fundamental low-resolution narratives, neither of which can be completely accurate because they can't encompass all the details. Obviously, human beings have an individual element and a collective element, a group element, let's say. The question is, what story should be paramount? And this is how it looks to me. In the West, we have reasonably functional, reasonably free, remarkably productive, stable hierarchies that are open to consideration of the dispossessed that hierarchies generally create.
There was a term I was thinking of talking about at some point here, a kind of a leprous social system, or you could think of leprous political systems, like a system wherein, because the leaders create like a level of insulation between themselves and the people on the lower levels of the hierarchy, whatever you want to call it, you can't adequately learn when things are going wrong, right? So the point is, the issue with lepers is that they quite often hurt themselves because there's insufficient communication from the nerve endings in their hands to, their brain, so they don't know that they're hurting, and they can't react in time to save their limbs from damage or whatever. So you could have, in theory, a social system that's quite similar in that, because you have the hierarchy who insulates themselves from the lower levels or the lower echelons of their society, that they actually are incapable of reacting when something is going wrong, and it goes wrong to such an extent that it causes a dysfunction or a complete destruction of the system, whatever it might be, social or political or whatever. I thought that was smart, but, can you tell me if it's stupid or something?
Our societies are freer and functioning.
And for the record, I'm sure probably someone else came up with an idea like that, but I thought it was a cool metaphor.
More effectively than any societies anywhere else in the world, and that and than any societies ever have. And as far as I'm
Yes, sir.
concerned, and I think there's good reason to assume this, it's because
For
the
the record,
fundamental low-res
I like America, but I'm not like a super patriot. Yeah. Again, not saying anything bad about USA. I'm just not really like the type of good old boy, so to speak.
resolution um, grand narrative that we've oriented ourselves around in the West is one of the sovereignty of the individual, and it's predicated on the idea that all things considered, the best way for me to interact with someone else is individual to individual, and to react to that person as if
This is one of the issues I think I see with like the whole notion of like a certain type of approach to racism. Is it feels like there are people who would like to substitute a scalpel for a bulldozer when it comes to dealing with racism, right? There are these sweeping types of generalizations that are made, and this is how we fix stuff, and it's not good in my mind.
they're both part of the process, because that's the right way of thinking about it, the psychological process by which things we don't understand can yet be explored, and by things that aren't properly organized in our society can be yet set right. The reason we're valuable as individuals, both with regards to our rights and responsibilities, is because that's our essential purpose, and that's our nobility, and that's our function. What's happening, as far as I'm concerned, in the universities in particular, and spreading very rapidly out into the broader world, including the corporate world, much to what should be its chagrin, is a collectivist narrative. And of course,
For the record, I said that wrong. Substitute a bulldozer. Substitute a bulldozer for a no. Substitute a scalpel for a bulldozer. Did I say that right? Yeah. Hopefully you got that.
there's some
Although ineptly
utility in a
communicated.
collectivist narrative, because we're all part of groups in different ways. But the collectivist narrative that I regard as politically correct.
Like, I've said this before. I think there are good reasons to create communities. I think there are really bad ones. Generally, the creation of community would indicate some sort of meaningful commonality. Race in America today, I don't think is a meaningful commonality. I can imagine scenarios in which you would have like an immigrant group who comes to America, so they have that in common. They created an immigrant community, like a Little Italy or something like that, where these people who have this common heritage can live together and whatnot. You can even have religious communities, which are quite successful, right? But it feels like race these days. I could even imagine like back in the day when there was slavery or something, or the Manifest Destiny pushing the Indians kind of west, where that would have created some sort of commonality. But today, like, to assume some sort of meaningful affinity with a person because of a superficial characteristic like race, it feels like it's just not really smart, I suppose.
Correct is a strange pastiche of
Oh, that's a pastry
postmodernism
thingy.
and neo-Marxism, and its fundamental claim is that
Pastiche.
no, you're not essentially an individual. You're essentially a member of a group, and that group might be your ethnicity, and it might be your sex, and it might be your race, and it might be any of the endless numbers of other potential groups that you belong to, because you belong to many of them, and that you should be essentially categorized along with those who are like you on that dimension in that group. That's proposition number one. Proposition number two is that the proper way...
I don't know if this is... The only one I noticed that was doing like a nervous tick was this guy, Michael Eric Dyson. And it's probably nothing to, sneeze at, but yeah, I guess I would be nervous in this as well, but it's something like, I think the only person I saw like doing it, this is kind of a nervous tick where he's
to view the world
Then
is as a
rocking back and
battleground
forth.
between groups of different power. So you define the groups first, and
taking
then you
notes.
assume that you
Good on ya.
view the individual from the group context, you view the battle between groups from the group context, and you view history itself as a consequence of nothing but the power maneuvers between different groups.
This is the thing that, like, it feels like Marxism, or the whole idea that like class wars or something like that. It feels like it's taking a very Machiavellian kind of view of history, almost like it's kind of a cynical. And the thing is, when people do stuff like this, you can have a scenario in which a person says something about this, they analyze a thing and they tell it to you how they're analyzing this thing. But you think, well, this seems to say more about you as a person than it does about the thing that you're describing. And it feels like this is kind of one of those things, like the type of people who adhere to this view, it says something about them. I don't know if it necessarily says something about history or about society.
Eliminates any consideration of the individual at a very fundamental level, and also any idea, for example, of free speech, because if you're collectivist at heart in this manner, there is no such thing as free speech. It isn't that it's debated by those on the radical left and let's say the rest of us, so to speak. It's that in that formulation, there's no such thing as free speech, because for an individualist, free speech is how you make sense of the world and reorganize society in a proper manner. But for the radical left type collectivist that's associated with this viewpoint of political correctness, when you speak, all you're doing is playing a power game on behalf of your group. And there's nothing else that you can do, because that's all there is. And not only is that all there is in terms of who you are as an individual now and how society should be viewed, it's also the fundamental narrative of history. For example, it's widely...
Yeah, you see, like, it feels like that whole idea is something that, like, they're putting this onto society, that this is what society, like, again, it feels like it says more about you as a person, that you think that's what other people think like. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. For the record, there's one last thing I actually wanted to. I had said in the last video I'd made on this, but well, the last iteration of this stream that I was doing, that it feels like there is this weird dynamic with free speech where speech is in theory free, action is not. Right? You can say whatever you want to in theory, but you can't do whatever you want to. But there's this weird gray area where they start to bleed together. Right, you can't tell someone to go kill someone because that's not protected free speech. Your speech is correlating to an illegal action. You could say that you can't propagandize for an immoral cause. That's not free speech because your speech is correlating to improper or immoral action. And this, I think, is where the debate comes in, and it feels like everyone draws the line at a... Well, maybe it's not about drawing lines so much as it's seeing the correlation between the speech and the action that's going on. And therefore, by perceiving it in a certain way, you would deem it to be either moral or immoral, free speech or, propaganda or inciting to violence. And that's, I think, where the issues arise with regards to that. Anyways, P.S. I want to, here's the guy, Stephen Smith. But I want to do something this Friday where I'm looking at just kind of bizarre / feel-good stories from around the world in the news. Generally just maybe stuff that doesn't really matter on a global scale, but, stuff that's maybe interesting or intriguing. So if you guys want to submit stuff in the comment section to this video, feel free. We'll try to maybe look at them and, nothing dirty or gross, though, right? And we'll try to do that this Friday. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please press the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment if you want to.